Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's Monday night, at least in America. So we're going to start. It's a Parsha Shir of Parsha's Toldot. Okay, the beginning of Parsha's Toldot is a very interesting Parsha. There's a lot to talk about. At the beginning of the Parsha, it says that Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka. And they were barren. They didn't have any children. According to the Medrash, Yitzchak was also infertile, not only Rivka, was also infertile. And finally, they davened together, and Rivka became pregnant. Okay. So the pasuk says, the children started fighting in utero. They were fighting. So Rashi says, what were they fighting about? That when she went by a Torah institution, Yaakov kicked, he wanted to go out. They went by an idol worshiping place, Esav kicked, he wanted to go out. So she's having this battle within herself. She's in a lot of pain, kicking more than normal. So she said, like, why am I interested in being pregnant with such pain? So she went to ask Hashem. And Mefarshim say she didn't want to ask her father-in-law, Avram Avinu, who seemingly would be the best choice to ask, because Avram Avinu was the greatest. But she went to the yeshiva Shem Ve'evet. Okay? So we need to understand a few things. So what happened over here? So Hashem said to her, through the shame, like it says, you have two nations in your stomach, don't worry about it. There's two nations, and they're going to always fight, and one basically is good, and one basically is not so good, and when one is strong, the other one is weak. When the other one's strong, the other one's weak, and don't worry about it. It's understandable why you're having this fighting going on within us. So let's understand something. A mother is in pain because the kid is kicking all over the place. This one wants to go out to good, this one wants to go out to bed. So and she has a doubt. She doesn't know what's going on. She thought it was one pregnancy. One pregnancy, the same kid wants to go to shul and wants to go to idol worshiping. I mean, how could that be? So when Hashem told her, don't worry, you can have two kids. Yeah. All of a sudden, it seems from the pasuk, she felt very good. So the commentaries, just 1 second. What do you mean she felt very good? If you're told by Hashem you're going to have twins and one's good and one's bad, you're going to feel good? What do you mean all of a sudden she felt good? So very brief, without elaborating on it, the Mefarshim say, what over here is, there's an expression in Chazal, Ein simcha kataras hasfekes. There's no greater joy than when doubts are solved. When Rachel had this pregnancy within her. Rivka. Rivka had this, thank you. Rivka had this pregnancy within her, and she doesn't know what's going on. She's in doubt. Is the child good? Is the child bad? What's going on? She doesn't know. So she's in doubt. And the doubt is worse than knowing that she has one kid that's bad. And same thing without elaborating, we learned about it already in the past. We had the same thing by Eliyahu and Har Carmel. Eliyahu and Har Carmel gets up to the Jews. There are 400 idol worshiper prophets. And Eliyahu was the lone ranger of godliness. And Eliyahu says, why are you in the middle of the threshold? If you want God, go to God. If you want the evil, go to evil. Why are you in the middle? And Chazal, without elaborating, I don't want to waste a lot of time on this. But the point is that the doubt of what's right, is God right or evil right, is worse than knowing at least what you're doing. So therefore, Rivka, yes, was in pain, but she didn't know, it was unknown. Once she was told by Hashem that there's two nations, so automatically she felt better already. She, at least the doubt was solved. Okay? But let's ask a different question. Yaakov and Esav, we know, represent Olam Hazeh is Esav. Olam Haba is Yaakov Avinu. What are they fighting about? Like it says in the Haggadah, I gave Esav all the best places in the world. And Yaakov and Nebuch and his children go into Golus because Yaakov and the Jews get Gan Eden. So what are they fighting about? What are they fighting about? There's plenty for both. There's Gan Eden for Yaakov Avinu. There's Olam Hazeh for Esav. Why are they fighting? But the explanation is like this. And there's another question, because I'm going to answer everything together, make a challenge. If Esav was already told that he's going to be bad, there's two problems with that. Number one, he didn't even have free choice yet. He's in utero. He's a fetus. How is it possible that Yitzchak already should be bad? Esav should be bad. And especially, he's Yitzchak and Rivka's child. How could he already be bad in utero? He's not even born yet. He's not bar mitzvah yet. How in the world can he be bad already? And secondly, and this we'll explain, this is contrary to psychologists of today. If he was already said that he's going to grow up bad, he's pre-programmed to be bad. So why is he punishable for being bad? He already had this tendency before he was even born. So what do we want from him when he's an adult? Why is that an issue? But the explanation is like this. The Rambam, in his introduction to Pirkei Avos, something called Shmeina Prakim, it's printed in the Gemaras. The Rambam wrote 8 chapters as an introduction to Pirkei Avos. And the Rambam in Shmeina Prakim says the following. There's 2 types of people serving Hashem. There is a chassid me'ula. Chassid me'ula means a lofty chassid, meaning he does everything correctly. He does everything right. He has a great neshama. He's just programmed to do right. Then you have a second person in serving Hashem, a second way. That's called Kevish Es Yitzrei. He has a strong Yetzer Hara, but he conquers it. So the Rambam in Shmeina Prakim, in Introduction to Pirkei Avos, says, as an introduction to the whole concept of morals and ethics, he says, there's 2 types of people serving Hashem. There is a level of Chassid Ba'ula, which is like Yaakov Avinu. And then there's a second person called Kevish Es Yitzrei. That's Esav. He has a strong Yetzer Hara, and he has to constantly fight the Yetzer Hara. So in utero, Esav wasn't bad. Hashem said to Rivka, Shnei Goyim Bevitnech. Rivka represents the mother of Klal Yisrael. Rivka is the mother of Klal Yisrael. And we'll get to even more about that later. Rivka is the mother of Klal Yisrael. Hashem is telling Klal Yisrael, there's 2 types of ways of serving Hashem. There's the tzaddik, and there's the Baal Tshuva, who has a strong Yetzer Hara, yet he conquers the Yetzer Hara. In utero, that was the difference between Yaakov and Esav. In other words, they both wanted Olam Hazeh and they both wanted Olam Haba. The difference, what they were fighting about, is their way of serving Hashem. Are they serving Hashem like Yaakov Avinu, Chassid Ba'ula, this holy saint, or are they serving Hashem in a way of Kevish Es Yitzrei, of a person that has to fight? In fact, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, is a remarkable concept. The same point that we're just making, but taking it a step further down. And that is, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, we learned this when we were learning Tanya, asks a question. A person can get depressed when they're not davening properly. The person can get depressed. So in chapter 26, Dr. Rebbe explains, don't get depressed. Because if you would only have one soul, and then you're not praying properly, that shows that you're not davening, you're not praying properly. But the reality is we have two souls. We have a Yaakov and an Esav, we have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. And the rule is, when two people are fighting, if one person doesn't show strength, the other person won't show strength either. When one person gets stronger, that's when the other person gets stronger. He says by davening, when a person davening, if they wouldn't be having kavana, if they wouldn't be davening properly, the Yetzer Hara wouldn't bother with them. The Yetzer Hara would not get into the way. Why are you wasting his time if the guy's not davening anyway? He said, on the contrary, the fact that the Yetzer Hara is fighting you shows that you are davening properly. And therefore it says the expression, V'aseh li mat'amim. Later on, when we discussed the bracha that Yaakov took from Esav, Rivka says to Yaakov, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but it's all the same point. Rivka says to Yaakov, bring me delicacies. Aseh li mat'amim. Yitzchok said to Esav also, Aseh li mat'amim. Make for me delicacies. Yitzchok Avinu needs two delicacies. He needs a choice of chicken or fish or a steak. I mean, he needs so many choices. He wants to bless his son, what he thought was Esav. He says, okay, it has to have a physical, you have to hold on to something physical when you give a bracha. So bring me a delicacy. He has to dafka too. So the explanation is like this. Yitzchak is telling Klal Yisrael, there's two delicacies that Hashem wants in serving him. There's, like we just said, the sweet delicacy of the goody, so to speak, the tzaddik. And then there is the bitter spice of a person that has to battle his Yetzer Hara. There's two types of delicacies. There's a sweet delicacy, and there's a sour delicacy. You have hot sauce delicacy. There's sour foods that are very delicate. They're delicacy. So which one's better? The truth of the matter is, God forbid, if somebody faints, you don't give them sugar to smell. It's not going to revive them. If somebody, God forbid, faints, you have to give them a sour thing, a bitter thing to smell. And that wakes them up. So there's two attitudes over here. It's not that they eat, they were fighting which way in utero until Asa became a Rasha later on in life. In utero, they're already fighting the two ways of serving Hashem. Like Chassid Ma'ula, which is Yaakov, okay, V'shis Yitzrei, and they're fighting which one's better, because they both are right. They both want Olam Hazeh, they both want Olam Haba. They want Olam Haba's reward. They want Olam Hazeh to be able to do physical mitzvahs and learn Torah in a physical way. So this is what they're fighting about. So therefore, it's a holy fight. It's not because Asa was already pre-programmed to be bad. And therefore, not only that, by the way, according to Torah, even if a person is born with the tendencies to steal or to kill or to do things like that, it doesn't justify the person's doing it. I know in the secular court, sometimes if they have a good lawyer, they'll say, well, the guy had this tendency of stealing, so when he stole, he's not to blame, it's his tendency, or he has a tendency to kill, and therefore when he kills, it's not his problem. According to Torah, you might have a tendency to steal, you might have a tendency to kill, but you still have the ability to overcome it. Yes, you might have a tendency. That doesn't mean you have to act on it, because Hashem gives every Jew the strength to be able to overcome all these tendencies. Okay, this is one thing. Second thing, when you learn this Parsha, you really get the impression that Yitzchok and Esav needed really good parenting classes. The pasuk says, the kids were born. It says, "Vayahav Yitzchak es Esav to Kitzayid b'fiv." Listen to this. The pasuk says, Yitzchak loved Esav because he gave him food. The Rivka oheves Yaakov, but Rivka loved Yaakov. Now, simply, what does it mean? Tzayid b'fiv. That Esav used to trick him. He used to trick Esav. He used to ask him, how do you tie salt? How do you tie the hay? He used to make believe that he was a great man. The whole Parsha, this issue of the Parsha is very difficult to understand. Why is it difficult to understand? It's a very simple thing. Yitzchak knew that Esav was a Rasha, because later on, when Esav came, to the brachas and so Yaakov came in and mentioned Hashem's name. So Yitzchak said, 1 minute, I'll call Yaakov. Esav never mentions Hashem's name. So don't you think Yitzchak knew who Esav was? What do you mean he loved Esav? He sided with him because he gave him food. In other words, it sounds, without learning the proper way of learning this, if you learn a Bible critic, Yitzchak was into food, and Esav brought Yitzchak food, good food, so therefore he liked it. Esav was a Rasha, and Yitzchak knew about it. That didn't matter. The main thing by Yitzchak was the food. That's the way you learn it, without any decency. But why didn't Yitzchak and Rivka, husband and wife, talk about their kids? I mean, normal parents, if they have children, they talk about their children, their education, their behavior, what's going on. Here, you have Yitzchak loves Esav, Rivka loves Yaakov. Well, they couldn't get together and talk about the kids. We couldn't Rivka tell Yitzchak, hey, you should know Esav's the Rasha. He's not the guy you think he is. And don't you think Yitzchak didn't know? You think you can fool a Yitzchak Avinu? Even when his eyes were dimmed. The Rebbe says he didn't get blind because Rashi says he was an Eila Tamima. He was a complete korban. And if he was blind, that would be a blemish. He wouldn't be Eila Tamima. So Yaakov, when his eyes dimmed, you think you can fool, Esav, when his Yitzchak, when Yitzchak eyes dimmed, you think you can fool a Yitzchak? What's going on over here? Why didn't they get there? They would need really good parenting classes to discuss their kids and get to a conclusion. But the answer is they knew exactly what was going on. The Arizal says, what does it mean that Yitzchak loved Esav kisayed b'fiv? What do you mean tzayed in his mouth? The Arizal says, the famous Arizal says, why did Yitzchak love Esav? Because from Esav, Rome, came the entire oral Torah. Why? Rab Meir, the famous Rab Meir, was a Roman convert. Rabbi Akiva's father was a Roman convert. Shmai and Naphtalion, the teachers of Hillel and Shammai, were Roman converts. Uncles was a Roman convert. The Arizal says, what did Yitzchak see in Esav? Kitzayid b'fiv. His mouth of Torah had an unbelievable greatness to it. It had an unbelievable greatness to it. Now there was nothing. Okay. So let me explain. Let's go back a little bit to have Kabbalah Chassidus 101. to understand what's going on over here. We know the Arizal writes, the Medrash says it in Medrash language, but then in Kabbalah and Chassidus explain it in Kabbalah and Chassidus, the same thing. It says in the Medrash at the beginning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yabeina Elam V'Samachlivam. Hashem was building worlds and destroying them. He said, Dain Leihanali, this is no good. Another world, Leihanali. Okay. Hashem said, the Medrash said, Hashem created the worlds, and he said, it's no good, next. Finally, he made this world. Now, what does that mean? Hashem does it right the first time. You think for a second Hashem is going to make a world and says, no, it's no good. It doesn't work like that. So what happens? So it says in Kabbalah, there was a world called Tehu, spiritual world, not physical worlds. There's an Olam HaTehu, which is the world higher than the world of Tikkun. What happened? There was what was called Shvira Sakelim. Simply, it means the vessels of the world of Tehu broke. Now, it's not physical dishes breaking, okay? Tehu is a super lofty spiritual world. But we know the rule, we discussed it the other week. The higher the thing, the lower it falls. What does that mean? The world of Tehu is super, super great. But there was Shvira Sakelim, and the sparks of the world of Tehu came tumbling down into this world. But because it originated in a much greater level, it fell to a very low level. Esav and Yaakov, why was Esav the firstborn? There's an advantage of being the firstborn. There is a certain kedusha of a b'chor. That's why you have to redeem it. He belongs to Hashem. Esav and Yaakov represents the world of Tehu, which is a super, super lofty world. And Yaakov refers to the world of Tikkun, which is organized, the spiritual world of Atzilus and Bria and Yetzir and Asiyah. The sparks that fell down, again, I'm talking spiritual, but you're going to have to take it any way you want. The sparks of the world of Tehu down here in this world fell very low, but they originate in a very lofty place, which explains a very simple phenomenon. There is inanimate, plant, animal, and human. We are the highest. Now, logically, somebody needs to sustain themselves from something higher than them, not lower. Think logically, if I need to be sustained, I need to be sustained from something higher than me, not something lower than me. Yet a human being is sustained from water, which is inanimate, food, which is plant life, animals. These are all things that sustain the human. So the question that Rizal asks, how is it possible that a human being, humans, are able to be sustained from things lower than us? So there's a whole long Megillah about this, but in a nutshell, the Arizal says, because the fact that inanimate, plant, and animal down here are lower than people in the source, because again, the higher the thing, the lower it falls. The fact that they come down here lower than humans, so therefore they originate in a higher place, spiritual place. Therefore, when a person eats food, what are they being sustained from? From the spark of the world of Tehu, which is greater than the human world of Tikkun, and therefore we're able to sustain ourselves from something lower because in the origin it's much greater. What's going on over here between Yitzchak and Rivka is how are you looking at things? Rivka looked at the practical, Yiddish mama. She looked at the practical. Yaakov behaved well. Esav was a Rasha. That's what she saw. Yitzchak, who was the obvious, which was even greater, he saw Esav down here, and he knew Esav was a Rasha because he said, Hakol kol Yaakov v'yadayim yaday Esav. He says Esav doesn't mention Hashem. He knew exactly who Esav was. Nobody ever tricked him. Nobody ever fooled him. Yitzchak Avinu knew exactly who Esav was, but Yitzchak saw that Esav, being the firstborn, down here he's a Rasha. That's because he comes from a loftier place. Why did Yitzchak love Esav? And why did Yitzchak want to bless Esav? Why did he want to give the bracha to Esav? Because Yitzchak, by blessing Esav, wanting to bless Esav, he wanted to reveal the lofty source of what Esav really is. Not the way Esav is down here, the way Esav is in the source. And therefore, this explains the entire Parsha, basically, of this. Why did Yitzchak want to bless Esav? Didn't he know who he was? And Rivka, what's going on over here? They both knew exactly who they were. Yitzchak looked at the source of Esav, where Esav comes from, and therefore he says, Yitzchak thought he could do this, by the way. Let me give Esav a bracha. I'll reveal this great level of his source, revealing it in Esav's body, so to speak, and he'll become the super great man, greater than Yaakov. That wasn't meant to be. And Rivka was right. Rivka says, basically, listen, hubby, you can't elevate Esav now. When will Esav be elevated? As we say in davening every day from the pasuk in Avadia, Va'alu Mashiach Bahar Esav Va'alu Mashiach Bahar Tzion Lishbeit Asar Esav V'hoisel Hashem Mamlucha. When Mashiach comes, then Yaakov Avinu is going to elevate Esav. That's why we find later when Yaakov is coming back from Laban and he met Esav, right? And they hugged and kissed, Kaviyachol, yeah? And Esav says, let's go together. At that moment, Chassidus explains, Yaakov thought he can elevate Esav by sending him those gifts and everything. But he realized he was mistaken. He can't do it. And therefore, when Esav said to him, let's walk home together, Yaakov says, I can't. You know when Rashi brings this down, you know when I'm going to deal with you? When Mashiach comes, I'm going to elevate all the sparks of Esav. So therefore, this is the basic debate going on between Yitzchak and Rivka. It's not, God forbid, that Yitzchak is senile and Rivka was the realist and who knows what. Yitzchak knew exactly who Esav was. Rivka knew exactly who Yaakov was. And Rivka, the difference was Yitzchak thought that he can elevate Esav in the source. And Rivka was right. It's not the time now. Now it's not going to happen. So it didn't happen. And in fact, that's why the brachas had to come. Okay, we'll get to that later. Let's leave this now. Okay. Another thing we find in the Parsha, before we get to the brachas of Yitzchak, which is a discussion within itself, we find Yitzchak Avinu in this week's Parsha is digging wells. Became a well digger. And there's a whole story. He made one well, after Shlishi in the Toldot. Okay, all the wells that Avraham Avinu dug, they Plishtim came and stuffed them up with dirt. Yitzchak came and dug a well. They fought over it. He dug another well. They fought over it again. One was called Asek, one was called Sitna. Finally, the pasuk says they dug a third well. And they didn't fight over it. And what was the name of that well? Ruchayves, which is, by the way, a city in Eretz Yisrael, which is supposedly in that place where that well was dug by Yitzchak Avinu. Okay, so the Parsha is speaking a lot. It's a good part of the Parsha talking about Yitzchak digging wells. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean Yitzchak himself dug wells. He had his servants digging wells. But bottom line is, Yitzchak dug wells. Last week's Parsha, what did Avraham Avinu do for a living? He had a hotel, hospitality. Why? I mean, like, what do the mean Yitzchak digging wells? So we learned in Chassidus this morning, but it's a very basic thing. The Avis, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov represent the three attributes of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. Avraham Avinu represents hospitality. Yitzchak represents Gvura, severity, and Yaakov Avinu represents Tiferes, which is Titin Emes LiYaakov, the attribute of Emes. What is, and we know it's brought down in all over the place, Chesed is Mayim, Eish, fire is Gvura. What's the difference between Mayim and Eish? Water comes down, fire goes up. What was the difference in the Aveda of Avraham and Yitzchak? They all served Hashem. Alakei Avraham, Alakei Yitzchak, Alakei Yaakov. We learned in the past, why do we say in the Shemona Esrei, Alokei Avraham, Alokei Yitzchak, Alokei Yaakov? Wasn't it the same God? Why would you say Elokeinu, Alokei Aveseinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? Why do you say Alokei Avraham, Alokei Yitzchak, Alokei Yaakov? The answer is because each one had their own unique way of serving Hashem. The way Avraham Avinu served Hashem was not the way Yitzchak and Yaakov did it. What was the unique way of serving of Avraham Avinu's? Where did it reveal itself? How did it manifest itself? Where did you see that in the personification of Avraham Avinu? Avraham Avinu was hospitality. What does hospitality mean? You come to my house, you didn't need a place to eat, meaning you don't have food. I have food. I am in a better position than you are at the present, a higher position. I am going to give down to you. That's the definition of Gemilas Chassadim. Achnasas Sarchim. You're in a better position and you give it to one in a lesser position. Therefore, what did Avraham Avinu do who personified the attribute of Chesed? Avraham Avinu did Gemilas Chassadim. He had Achnasas Sarchim. He had guests. What was Yitzchak's Aveda? Yitzchak's Aveda is Gevura. Gevura means restriction, limitation, not giving openly. That's Chesed. Gevura means you limit. You don't deserve it, you don't get it. Chesed means even if you don't deserve it, you get it. Gevura means you might not deserve it, and you're not, therefore you don't get it. Therefore, what does it mean? It's like removal. It's like fire that goes up. How did Yitzchak personify that level? By digging wells. What is digging wells? There's water buried in the ground, but you don't see it, and you can't get to it. What do you do when you dig a well? When you dig a well and you hit water, then the water comes up. That's the nature of a well. The water comes up. Yaakov Avinu, that's Midas Tiferes. Okay, Emes. Tiferes is beauty. What did Yaakov Avinu do in his life? What was he playing with? In Parsha Vayishlach, Vayetze, colored sticks. He was playing with colored sticks, with the calf, with the goat, and the izim, and the, okay? He played with colored sticks. Why did they get colored sticks? Because colored sticks represents beauty, multicolored, that, has both the chesed and gevurah together. Therefore, it works like this. Avram Avinu, these are three ways of serving Hashem. There's a way of bringing godliness down into the world. That was Avram Avinu's mission. What did Avram Avinu go do? He didn't stay home like Yitzchak Avinu did. Avram Avinu went out. Holoch v'nasei negba. Avram Avinu was traveling to bring godliness into the world because his attribute was chesed. What was Yitzchak's aveda? Yitzchak, on the other hand, is gevurah. He elevated the people to God. He elevated the water, the people up to a level of God. What do we find by Matan Torah? The same thing. Hashem came down on Har Sinai, God coming to world, and Moshe Rabbeinu was told, Alei al Hashem, go up to Hashem, meaning world elevated to Kedusha. These are the two levels. So therefore, it's not stam that Yitzchak Avinu had nothing to do with himself, but to dig wells, and therefore, that's what he did for a living. No, that personified his way of serving Hashem. Avram Avinu serving Hashem was through hospitality. Yitzchak Avinu was digging within the Jew and finding the pintaliyid, the essence of the Jew, and revealing that pintaliyid. And that's why this is the Aved of Yitzchak. What's interesting over here, the Ramban writes and elaborates on this. The three wells correspond with the three Beis HaMikdash. The three Bati Mikdashas, to say it correctly. The first two were destroyed. That's what the pasuk says. They fought over it, over two of them. The last one, the last one is permanent. What does that mean? The third Beis HaMikdash is coming from Hashem, and there's not going to be any destruction. And nobody's going to fight and destroy the Beis HaMikdash. So the Ramban explains that the first two wells correspond with the first two Beis HaMikdash that were destroyed. They fought over it, and it was destroyed. On the other hand, the third Beis HaMikdash, Rechaves, Rochav, broadness, revelation of God, ultimate Mashiach. That's why the third Beis HaMikdash is represented by the third well. Okay, now, another interesting thing in the Parsha, this is a lot to talk about, but let's talk a little bit about the brachas that Yitzchak wanted to give Esav, and instead he gave to Yaakov Avinu. Okay? You have to understand this. Yitzchak at this time, Rashi says, he was 123 years old. To understand what I'm saying next, you need to understand this. At this time, when Yitzchak wanted to give the brachas to Esav, he was 123 years old. Yitzchak died at 180. Okay, that means he had 57 more years to live. Got it? Let's keep that in mind. After giving the boys the brachas, he lived another 57 years. Okay? Introduction to the brachas, Yitzchak got hold, his eyes were dimmed. Okay? Why were his eyes dimmed? What happened to Yitzchak's eyes? So Rashi says three interpretations. One was when Yitzchak was brought up on the Akedah, and the Malachi Ashari started crying, whatever it means, and their tears fell into Yitzchak's eyes and they affected him. Another opinion is that the daughters were idol, Yosef's wife were idol worshippers. Okay, this is why she doesn't bring down. And the smoke from their idol worshipping affected Yitzchak's eyes. Why didn't it affect Rivka's eyes? Mefarshim explained, because she was used to it from her father's house already. So Rivka was used to idol smoke, so it didn't bother her. Okay, but Yitzchak wasn't used to it, so it bothered him. And then Rashi says the third thing. And let's analyze this thing a little bit. The third interpretation, why did Hashem make Yitzchak's eyes dimmed for 57 years, which is, by the way, close to a third of his life, that he shouldn't be able to see clearly who's Yaakov and who's Esav, that Yaakov should get the brachas. Stop to think for a second. We don't think. Stop to think for a second. If Hashem wanted Yaakov to get the brachas, he wanted Yaakov to get the brachas. You know what Hashem could have done? He could have called in Yitzchak and said, listen, Boychik, give the brachas to Yaakov. Hashem could have done. Instead, Hashem made Yitzchak's vision dimmed. He said before, not blind, but dimmed for 57 years. Come on. And here the lesson is very, very important. Yes, Hashem could have told them Esav's a Rasha, and now you can't elevate him and give the brachas to Yaakov. Listen to this. Hashem didn't want to speak Lashon Hara even against Esav. Can you imagine? Yitzchak, Hashem didn't want to speak Lashon Hara to Yitzchak about Esav, and rather than doing that, he dimmed Yitzchak's eyes for 57 years. It's unbelievable. Lesson obvious. No Lashon Hara. Imagine Hashem himself, and Yitzchak again knew that Esav was no good. Yet Hashem said, Yitzchak, it's better for your eyes to dim for 57 years rather than I should speak Lashon Hara to you about your son Esav. It's unbelievable. Okay, so now let's go a little bit into it again. The whole bracha story is weird. It's strange. Why did Hashem have to make Yaakov getting the brachas b'mirma? Mirma means with trickery. Yes, legally, and Yitzchak finally found that out, that Yaakov Avinu bought the firstborn right. Yitzchak didn't know that. When Esav complained after he realized Yaakov took the brachas, and Yitzchak said, oh my God, he stole my firstborn right, and now he stole my blessings. So Yitzchak said, oh, hold on a second. So he got the first, so then he deserved the brachas. Then you don't deserve the brachas. So stop complaining. But Yitzchak didn't know that. Why are these brachas done in such a way that it doesn't make sense? Okay? Number one. Number two, which it's so funny when you learn these psukim, you run through them and say, oh, great story. And you stop to think for a second, something is pretty problematic over here. Rivka, listen to this. Okay, listen to the conversation between Rivka and Yaakov. Rivka calls in Yaakov and said, listen, I overheard your father telling Esav to bring him to that he should get blessed. Okay? I want you to go and bring me the two goats. I will make delicacies, and I want you to go get the bracha. Yeah, that's what Rivka says to him. So he says, 1 minute, I can't. He's gonna curse me because Esav had hairy hands and Yaakov didn't, and he's gonna touch me because he can't see. He's gonna touch me, and he's gonna see I'm not Esav, and he's gonna curse me. That's what he says. But Esav like klola v'lei bracha, and Yaakov says to Rivka, not only will he not bless me, he'll curse me. So listen what Rivka says. I get the curse. If he curses you, I'll get it. It's on my head. Yeah. So what happened? He went and did what his mother wanted. Which normal child who loves his mother, the mother says, if you get a curse, it's I'll be the curse, not you. Yaakov should have protested and said, what are you talking about? And I would rather get it than you. Rivka says, I'll get the curse. The curse will be on my head. Yaakov's fine with it. Okay, go. So simply the Mefarshim explain that Yaakov knew that Rivka you could trust, and it's not going to happen. There's not going to be any curses. That's what the Mefarshim all explain in simple meaning of the pasuk, that nothing's going to happen because Rivka you could trust. Hashem's not going to make it happen. Issue number 2 that needs to be understood. Next, he finally gives him a bracha, and he says, "V'yiten l'choho elokim," the famous bracha. V'yiten, Rashi says, "V'yiten" with a vav means yiten v'yachse v'yiten. The bracha is going to be ever flowing. Yeah. Now we know Hashem has different names. There's a name Hashem, which is Chesed, Tiferes, gracious, giving. Elokim is, like we said before, Simtsum, limitation, concealment. You would think these brachas that Yitzchok v'yitul choho Elokim, v'yitul choho Hashem, Yudke Vavke, the gracious God. What do you mean? You should the concealed, limited, restricted God level of God is going to give the brachas? What is that supposed to mean? The whole bracha doesn't make sense. Number one, it couldn't go through normal channels. Secondly, Yaakov doesn't care his mother gets cursed. Thirdly, why is it saying Elokim? So if you remember, we spoke with Light and the daughters in Parsha Vayera 2 weeks ago. We spoke that great things like Mashiach, David HaMelech, Light and his 2 daughters, the ancestors of David HaMelech, the ancestors of Mashiach. Super great things can't come normally. What goes on over here in the Mefarshim says very interesting point. The Medrash says that Yaakov looked Shufra the Yaakov, me'ain Shufra the Adam Rishon. Yaakov Avinu looked like Adam Rishon, which in a deeper sense means Yaakov Avinu was the neshama of Adam Rishon. Just like Adam Rishon had all the sparks in him, all the neshamas of all future generations were in Yaakov Avinu. There's a lot of connection between Yaakov and Adam Rishon. What was the terrible thing of Adam Rishon? He sinned in the Eitz Hadas. What does it say over there? Hanachash haya arum. The Nachash, the snake, was sly. The Nachash didn't go and say, go eat from the tree. He was sly. He did it in a not normal way. He didn't come to Chav and say, go eat from the tree. He said, 1 minute. So Chav added, she said, Hashem said, don't touch. He pushed her, and he was very sly. This level of Yaakov Avinu taking the brachas b'mirma because Yaakov Avinu was Adam Arishan. It says in Sfarim this was to undo the Chetei Tzadas. And therefore was such a great bracha, it couldn't come through natural channels of normal people. Hashem saying to Yitzchak, you know what? Give it to Yaakov. He deserves it. It had to go around in a crazy roundabout way. Because they're too great of brachas to be able to come in the normal way. And that's why it says Elokim. Elokim, yes, means concealment and limiting and hiding. But Elokim, because we said before, refers to Gevura, power, might. The Yit and L'cha Elokim, Kabbalah and Chassidus explain, this is a level of Elokim that's super great, super powerful. That is the Elokim of Kedusha, meaning the power and the thrust of Kedusha. That's where these brachas came from. The great brachas came v'yitan l'chaho Elokim, because Elokim here doesn't refer to the low levels of Elokim, which represents tzimtzum, concealment, contraction. It represents the super power of the thrust of the ultimate great level of Hashem. And that's what came down in these brachas. And because there's such great brachas, they couldn't come through normal channels. Therefore, Yaakov Avinu had to take it b'mirma, and therefore the whole thing with the curse now also makes sense. It wasn't a normal thing to begin with. The whole thing wasn't normal, because these brachas coming down from Yitzchak Avinu had to be in such a holy way that it couldn't come through normal channels. And this again explains that Rivka wanted, like we said before, Rivka wanted in this case, not only that she loved Yaakov and Yitzchak loved Esav. Rivka knew that Esav is not going to do tshuva in this world. Yitzchak, again, like we said before, Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav because he thought in the source, if we'll tap into the source, Esav will be revealing his source and the great level of Kedusha, and he'll do tshuva. Rivka knew that it's not happening. Rivka knew that in this world, Esav's not going to do tshuva. Unlike Yishmael, and there's another interesting thing. Yishmael, Avram's son Yishmael, the Gemara says at a din of a guy. He wasn't Jewish. His mother was Hagar. Yishmael was not a Jew. Esav, on the other hand, the Gemara calls his parents are both Jewish. Yet Esav was Yisrael Mumar, a rebellious Jew. But we find interesting, Yishmael did tshuva and Esav didn't. When it came to bury Avram, at the end of last week's Sedra, it says, who buried him? Yitzchak v'Yishmael. Yishmael was older. It should have said Yishmael v'Yitzchak. No, Yitzchak v'Yishmael. Why? So the Rashi brings down, because Yishmael did tshuva. When Yitzchak died, it says Esav and Yaakov buried him. Not Yaakov and Esav buried him. Esav didn't do tshuva. But there's an interesting connection over here. The Gemara tells a story, it's getting later, but the Gemara tells a story when Yaakov, the Gemara is in Seita, and there's Medrashim. In the Targum Yonasan ben Oziel, he says the same thing in Vayechi. When they came to bury Yaakov Avinu Marsa Machpelah, okay, they took him out of Egypt and they buried him in Marsa Machpelah. So the Gemara says Esav came with an army and he didn't want to let them bury Yaakov in Marsa Machpelah. Said, why not? Listen, Avram and Sarah, couple. Yitzchak and Rivka, couple. Now there's place for two more people. So Yaakov buried Leah there, so he took up his grave. The next grave is mine. So Yaakov cannot be buried there. That's what Esav came with, a legitimate complaint. So the Gemara says, and the Medrash says, that they said, no, it's not true. You sold Yaakov your share in the Marsa Machpelah also. He sold it to him. So he said, prove it. The document was back in Egypt. They didn't have the deed to prove that Yaakov bought Esav's share of Marsa Machpelah. So he sent Naphtali, who was a quick runner, super quick. They sent them back to Egypt to get the document. Meanwhile, they're not burying Yaakov. Esav's refusing to bury Yaakov. So Don had one son. His name was Chushim. He was deaf. Gemara says he was deaf. He didn't know what was going on. All he sees is his grandfather, Yaakov Avinu, is laying in the sun disrespectfully. So he, sign language, I guess, or whatever. What happened? And they told him that Esav is stopping the burial. So he said, until Naphtali comes back from Egypt, my grandfather's he took out an axe, chopped off Esav's head. This is what the Gemara says. And this is already in Kabbalah. Esav's head rolled into Ma'aras Machpelah near Yitzchak's feet. It rolled into Ma'aras Machpelah next to Yitzchak's feet. Why? And then the Gemara says the Esav's guy saw that their guy was killed, that he took his body and they took it away. But where is Esav's head? In Ma'aras Machpelah next to Yitzchak Avinu. Why? Because there was this connection between Yitzchak and Esav, like we said before. Yitzchak was working with Esav to try to elevate him and reveal the original source of Esav's greatness. It didn't happen because the time wasn't there. But he says that the head of Esav is even after death was connected to Yitzchak Avinu. There's no time now, we're done. But it says he rolled next to the feet of Yitzchak. Yitzchak opened up his eyes. Yitzchak opened his eyes, the Gemara says, and then he when he fell back, whatever, the whole story in the Gemara. But the bottom line is there was this connection. That's why Yitzchak loved Esav, not Chas v'Sholem because he gave him food or because he took care of him. Chas v'Sholem. He saw the Torah that was going to come out from Esav, Rabbi Kiva, that the whole oral Torah is based on him. That Meir, Unklis, all the teaching of Hillel and Shammai came from Shmai and Naphtali, all converts. That's what Yitzchak saw. Yitzchak saw the source of Esav. Rivka didn't, and Rivka in this world was right. But therefore, now everything in the Parsha seems to make much more sense about the reality. They could have made a reality show about this Parsha, a few of them, in fact. They made a whole reality show about Esav selling the firstborn right and everything else. Anyway, that's it for tonight. The Mitzvah Shem Wednesday, 8 o'clock, is Halacha of Muksa and Tanya. Everybody's invited to come back. I hope everybody has a great week and a great bunch of days. And it should all be
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Rabbi
you, Rabbi.
Shusterman.
Thank you.